Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome, Professor Kadambot Siddique, in this fourth webinar of the International Monthly Webinar Series on issues related to rural. I welcome you all in this webinar and re-welcome all those participants who are with us since the webinar. We have today two very renowned and distinguished speakers with us. The keynote speaker is the Vice Chancellor of University of Punjab, Professor Dr. and the guest speaker is.
Your voice is breaking up some reason, so if you could closer to the microphone and.
Yes, let me.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is it okay now?
No, that's very good, clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kadambot Siddique, to join in for this fourth webinar of the monthly international webinar series on issues related to rural economy. I welcome you all in this all-important webinar. We are about to begin in 3 minutes. So I will wait for a couple of more minutes so that maximum number of participants can join in. For the appraisal of the participants, let me inform you that for this particular webinar, we received more than 460 registrations, and I have shared the link on 14th, and I have just reminded everyone about 30 minutes ago, and I hope that maximum number of participants will join in next couple of minutes, and then we will start formally at 10:30. National webinar series on issues related to rural economy. We have 3 previous webinars. This is the continuation of those 3. The very first one, the presenter was Professor Dr. Stephen Schlitzy from UWA. And the second one, Dr. Muhammad Khalid Bashir, I myself presented. And the third one, Professor Dr. Mithat Direk from Selçuk University, Turkey. And this is the fourth one. We have 2 renowned professors with us, very renowned professors, researchers, Professor Dr. Iqrar Ahmed Khan, Vice Chancellor, University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, Sitara Imtiaz. He is very renowned and well-known personality, not only in Pakistan, but also around the globe. So welcome you on board, sir. And we have the guest speaker today is Professor Dr. Kadambot Siddique, who is a Hackett Professor of Agriculture, Chair and Director of the UWA Institute of Agriculture, the University of Western Australia. Over the past 30 years experience in agriculture, research, teaching and management in both Australia and overseas, he has developed a national and international reputation in agricultural sciences, especially in the fields of crop physiology, production agronomy, farming systems, genetic resources, breeding, research in cereal, grain and pasture legumes, and oilseed crops. Professor Siddique has conducted research on adaptation of crops to dryland environments and the phenological, morphological, physiological, biochemical, and genetic traits that enable crops to cope with various abiotic stresses. He has published more than 500 scientific papers and book chapters. Professor Siddique is the highly cited researcher in agricultural sciences and Thomson Reuters and Clarivate Analytics. As a result of Professor Siddique's personal research and with others with whom he collaborates, Australia has become one of the major grain legume exporting nations in the world. His pioneering research on chickpea has contributed enormously to the Australian chickpea industry, which is currently valued at more than $600 million per annum. Distinguished Professor Shenyang Agricultural University, Adjunct Professor, Northwest Agriculture and Forestry University, Lanzhou University, Guangzhou University, and Huazhong Agricultural University, China. He is a distinguished professor in these universities. So fellow of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, Australian Agricultural Institute, and Indian National Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Professor Siddique was elected as fellow of the African Academy of Sciences, first Australian to be elected to the academy. He is also fellow of the Indian Society of Plant Physiology. Professor Siddique was designated by United Nations FAO as Special Ambassador for the International Year of Pulses in 2016. Professor Siddique is the recipient of national and international awards, including ORIC Memorial Award, member of the Order of Australia, 2014 Western Australian Year of the Award, the Dunhuang Award by China's Gansu Provincial Government, and the Friendship Award from the Chinese Central Government, the biggest award for a foreign expert, in recognition of his outstanding contributions to agricultural sciences and education in China over the years. In 2019, the Federation of Indian Associations of Western Australia named Professor Siddique as the Western Australian Indian of the year 2021. Professor Siddique has also trained numerous honors, MSc and PhD students. He has developed an extensive network of scientists within Australia and has also established a diverse range of overseas China, India, Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Malaysia, East Timor, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Europe, Canada, and USA. Collaborative research and educational projects. He holds a number of national and international committee positions. We are very lucky to have Professor Dr. Kadambot Siddique with us. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing your time for today's webinar. I invite first Professor Dr. Iqrar Ahmed Khan to please say a few words if he is with us at the moment. As I was informed that he has to travel today, so he might be traveling and there could be some internet issues during the travel. If you are there, sir, over to you. I think Dr. Khan is busy somewhere, so I hand over the mic to Professor Dr. Kadambot Siddique. Dear sir, please.
Thank you, Khalid, for that very nice introduction. Now I will just try to share my presentation and then we will get on to straight away. Why I can't share? Share, but you're still there somehow. I can't see the All right. One second.
Yes, no problem. Take your time, please.
I'll just 1 second.
I wasn't. I need to share my computer. I'm giving a talk.
Yeah, I'm just live now. What I'll do is that I'll cut off my. So I have to share.
Okay.
But my slides I have kept here on they're open as normally.
So have you started PowerPoint presentation?
Not yet. But I'm just trying to share my computer. Normally there's this, but I'm not going to see where it is. It's
Yeah.
giving,
So
browse the on.
no.
Browse my computer.
No.
No.
So go back to
Yeah.
the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You just click. Oh no, it's not working.
We can always restart if you want to.
No.
It's just a great.
Here? No.
No. It's on the Microsoft Team. Here. So share is here. While I'm not seeing my screen.
There.
Oh, okay.
So that's the one.
Yeah, let's put it in. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when
go to
you-
the number one. What's the number one?
Oops.
The top one.
I'm just going to exit out of Zoom because I was not supposed
No.
to open that.
Let's go to the top. Sorry for this.
No, that's okay.
Now open up. Now let us do it. They're ready.
So you're ready to...
Yeah, present here. They're all live.
Yeah.
Now, can you see me, Khalid? Can you see the slide? No,
Yes, sir, I can see the slides.
You sure we don't need to do this?
You're done?
You sure?
Yes.
Yep. Just one more check. Can you see the second slide, Khalid?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll go back. So that's good. Sorry for the little bit trouble. We always find some trouble when we connect overseas. But anyway, this is all done. Once again, I thank you for the kind invitation. And of course, the relationship between University of Western Australia and University of Agriculture, Faisalabad is very strong. And you are one of our best alumni. And so we recognize that. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about diversified food system to enhance food and nutritional security within the next half an hour and try to give as much time for some questions. So the outline of my presentation is global hunger and malnutrition. Very briefly, you're all aware of that. And the prevalence of unhealthy diets, challenges facing security and nutrition, that's food security and nutrition, and the diversification of the food system. What can we do? And I'll give some examples, quinoa and pulses, which is quite dear to your country, and some conclusion. Before doing that, I just want to refresh, this is Australia, and this is a state of Western Australia where I am located. This is a very large state, second largest in the world. First one is somewhere in the former Soviet Union. 2.6 million people, not many people. Majority live in Perth, the capital city. And our graduates from UWA get very high salary, which shows the prestige of the university. It's a very good city with affordable and also ranked very high in terms of trade and so on. Now Australian economy is largely driven by this state. Are you still with me, Khalid?
I'm there.
Yeah, can you see my slide, third slide?
Yes, yes, I can see.
So the University of Western Australia is located very close to the Perth city, not far from the city, but beautiful Swan River in the background. And my laboratories and buildings are here. It's a comprehensive university, meaning we have all kinds of disciplines, including agriculture, medicine, engineering, law, humanities, and so on. Very well internationally recognized university, and you can go and look at various ranking, and that comes in the top 100. And also, more importantly, we have well established a partnership with the industry. In my case, very strong connection with agriculture industry. In the case of medical people, they're connected with the medical industry and the community at large. We are part of the Group 8 universities. There are 40 universities in Australia. The Group 8 is a coalition of the best research-intensive universities, and 70% of the research in Australia is undertaken in the Group 8 universities, including University of Western Australia. You may all heard that we got Nobel Prize in 2005. Professor Barry Marshall, who is a medical graduate and he's still a staff here as a professor of clinical medicine, microbiology, and he's got leading the Marshall Center for Infectious Disease. Very close friend. I'm trying to arrange him giving a lecture online to the Pakistan Academy of Science, again with in partnership with Professor Ikra Khan. Hopefully it can be done soon. Overall, we are ranking 88 to 85, and at the moment, and in life and agriculture science, we were 24, but now we are now 16 in the world in life agriculture science and #1 in Australia. A small group of people. We don't have agricultural universities in Australia. We are a small group punching beyond our weight. And a lot of that is excellence in research and also a partnership with a number of international universities, including UAF Pakistan. Hunger and malnutrition There is a report by the FAO and UNICEF. It's worth reading, the state of food security and nutrition in the world. I won't go into the details. You can download and read. The main issues I want to emphasize: over 690 million people in the world still hungry. In fact, it has gone to 821 because of the COVID-19 pandemic has brought in something like 150 million more into that hunger bracket. And it is rising. And it will exceed 840 million by 2030. In fact, it is now sitting in 821 million already. The economic and social implication of coronavirus I mentioned is now 150 million undernourished people in the world, underscoring the immense challenges we're going to face with SDG 2, that is a zero hunger. Asia Pacific region, I'll show some map later on. Hunger and malnutrition levels decreased over the last decade, but continues to face high prevalence of malnutrition. Although the hunger has decreased, there's something like 93 million stunted children under 5 years old, 30% of the population, including in Pakistan, India, and other regions. The other region is the Sub-Saharan Africa, 237 million facing chronic malnutrition with 59 million stunted children under 5 years old. Now, this is a paper I recently published in Nature Plants. Again, the percentage of wasting and stunting in children under 5 years. Here I just focused largely on certain countries. And for example, take India, next door neighbor, 38% is a really high stunting compared to the world average of 21.3%. Your figure is also pretty close to that. That is what I say, your figure, the Pakistan figure. The wasting also is very high. This means the cognitive development of young children, their potential will be never reached, and we're going to face a huge problem as these kids grows up. The whole countries in the region going to suffer. So this is the 7 sub-regions have a high or very high stunting prevalence. Percentage of stunted children under 5. Stunted means it is the height in relation to the weight. And you can see that the Southern Asia region is pretty much in red. And then you can see the Sub-Saharan Africa, so 31.7% there. Eastern and Middle Africa, 31 to 34%, very high. And sorry. If you look at the 75% of all wasted children live in lower and middle income countries. So that is a really good correlation with the income. So they don't have the purchasing power to buy the right food. Asia, 54% of the children, and Africa, 40% of the children. So 64% of overall stunted children live in lower and middle income countries. So again, wasting and stunting the children of the world, children living in Asia, particularly Southern Asia, and also Sub-Saharan Africa. That's where we should have focus. Unhealthy diets. So if you look at the old favorites, the Green Revolution, what it has done is wonderful job, and it's more than 60 years since Green Revolution has taken place. And we have been able to bring the hunger down, and to some extent nutrition, but the practices we still follow and the technology we still adopt has helped us to move forward. But the fact is that the hunger and also particularly malnutrition remains the same. We're just focusing on 2 or 3 crops, wheat, rice, and maize, even in your own country. The governments have been preoccupied by pushing and providing subsidies, etc. over the years for those crops. I don't think we need to blame the government on that. Now it's time for us to think about, are we there to just to provide food to fill the belly? Should we look at the nutritional side of the food as well? So there is more recent trends, soybean, legumes, pulses, good oil, sunflower oil, palm, and also wherever meat and fish are coming into the equation. So the unhealthy current food consumption pattern. So one side, I talked about malnutrition, but also there is obesity happening in many countries, including both developed and developing countries. Processed meat, red meat, trans fatty acid. sweetened sugars and salt and sodium, high starch diet. The low consumption of the protective food is the main reason. Fruits and vegetables, beans, nuts and seeds, whole grains, and polyunsaturated fatty acids and so on. So this is the unhealthy diet. Malnutrition is a risk of chronic diseases, stunted children, and also leading to obesity in both developed and developing countries. For example, something like 18 to 19% of the adults over 18 years are obese in the world. For example, in my own country, in Australia, 69% of the adults are overweight or obese, more food, eating more food. And that's every 2 in 3 person is affected. Rice is one of the major food in Asia. If you take, for example, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Laos, Cambodia, Pakistan is not a major rice consumer. And this is really causing a lot of problems. As you know that 70% of the caloric intake in some of these countries coming from rice, and there is no other macro and micronutrients coming through rice. Protein is pretty low, and hence what we call the hidden hunger, the lack of certain vitamins and minerals. For example, vitamin A, then iron, zinc is much low in this diet, which is leading to chronic malnutrition in these countries. So what are the challenges facing food security, nutrition, and the food system? So one of the problems is we have got production on one side and also the nutrition on the other side. Environmental degradation continues to unstable use of already limited resources, water, land, and biodiversity, even in your own country. More food with less resources is an important aspect. Coping with serious climate change implications. Lack of economic and social development, particularly with the COVID-19, is really giving big dent to everyone, but more so with the low economic countries. High birth rate in certain countries, political unrest and wars and conflict, which is also now, look at your neighboring country, Afghanistan, even after 20 years, lack of stability. What will happen? There will be increased poverty, hunger and malnutrition will sustain. The limiting capacity to address hunger and malnutrition, bridging a production gap. We can look at that, what is the potential production, and we can quickly start bridging that gap. 70%, at least 50% more food is needed by 2050, at least this is the United Nations projection. Limited yield potential. We're seeing plateauing of genetic potential of crops like rice, wheat, and maize. Probably it is less than 1% per annum. That's not sufficient for us to take to the so-called feed 10 billion people. The nutrition gap is worrying me. Increasing the production of staple crops like rice and wheat, as I mentioned, that increases the malnutrition due to insufficient supply of nutrient-rich food. So what we need, the solution is we need to diversify our food system for the healthy diets, but also to reduce malnutrition, but also climate resilience, because monocropping can lead to disaster. I just published a paper in PNAS this week. It's worth looking at integrated cropping system, how that can reduce the carbon footprint, but also improve the profitability. And that's done using 16 experiments over 12 years in China. So the diversification of the system and harnessing the potential of traditional local food for healthy diet. So a food system consists of elements, environment, people, input, process, infrastructure. We need to look at the holistic approach, the production, processing, distribution, marketing, preparation, and consumption. The outcome of these activities will help, namely nutrition and health status, but also socioeconomic growth, which is very important, empowering the rural community, empowering the women, and also small-scale entrepreneurship, which I'll talk to you later. And also equity, because everyone will get the food and nutrition, and by diversification, we can get environmental sustainability. They are interrelated, interdependent components. So production, post-harvest handling, distribution, marketing, and consumption. On the left-hand side, enabling policy environment. The most important thing, why we are not reaching there, the government policy has to change. They can't simply put subsidies on rice, wheat and maize when ignoring the other crops where, yes, we have reached quite a good production in the case of rice and wheat, etc. But government has to start thinking in a different. Regional cooperation is very important. And institutional human capacity development. Many people in the system doesn't have any understanding about the nutrition requirements and other crop exist on the planet. There are something like 7,000 agricultural species. And of that, 4 species, rice, wheat and maize, at least 3, dominate 60% of the caloric intake. And there are many other crops, and we haven't really utilized that properly. So the current agricultural system relies on few staple crops, as I mentioned, and they are more vulnerable to environmental shocks. For example, if you get a drought or a waterlogging, if it is just 1 or 2 species, if there is a total wipeout, then what will the farmers do? And there's a negative consequences because of that. Limited diversity of food system, including consumption, leading to, as I mentioned, unbalanced and unhealthy malnutrition. So it's very essential to diversify our food system. So fruits, vegetables, and I know that Pakistan is giving quite a lot of emphasis on particularly the province of Punjab on fruits and vegetables, pulses and food legumes. Again, you need to do a lot more work in your country. Nuts and seeds, whole grains, polyunsaturated fatty acids. Some areas, particularly Karachi and other areas, seafood is important. I'm just giving some examples here. There is millet. Millet is very much adapted to dry land conditions, many types of environments, rich in very number of nutrients, including iron, and it's a versatile crop. There's another one called Drumstick Moringa, and again, it is one of the best nutritious food I have seen. Things like elephant foot yam and taro. Taro is one of the tuber crops which is very much adapted to transient waterlogging conditions. And these are been traditionally grown in many parts of the world, but they were replaced by the so-called modern green revolution crops like rice, wheat, and maize. As a result, they are lost from the landscape. So they are being grown. These crops are rich in macro and micronutrients. For example, iron, magnesium, zinc, selenium, and calcium. Many vitamins like vitamin B complex, C, K, and others, antioxidants and fibers. And with this background, UN General Assembly declared 2021 as the International Year of the Fruits and Vegetables. And good number of these traditional crops have provision for high nutrition, as I mentioned earlier, are well adapted to marginal soils. For example, I gave example of millet, harsh environments and resilience to climate change. And they play an important role in the cultural tradition, heritage in the subsistence agriculture, economy of poor people throughout the developing world, particularly indigenous people. Despite their wonderful nutritional and adaptation benefit, they have been replaced and pushed by the new green revolution crops, but also little research and development attention has been taken place. What are the multi-dimensional benefits of traditional underutilized crops? I now call it as future smart food crops. Food and nutritional security, resilience to climate change, as I mentioned earlier. They can withstand certain harsh environments because they are locally adapted over the centuries. They need low input. Many of them doesn't need the so-called high amount of nitrogenous and phosphatic fertilizers we apply in our wheat, rice, maize system. And with this way, we can conserve the biodiversity and cultural heritage. And I'll show you this also can improve the livelihood and rural development and economic and social development. So this is the concept by which we should be pushing this kind of crops into the landscape. The global interest started with the Convention of Biological Diversity, Brazil, 1992, the FAO, 4th International Technical Conference on Plant Genetic Resources, and also Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, Germany, 1996, under the banner of the United Nations FAO. Example is quinoa. A lot of you have heard about it. It is a traditional crop cultivated in the Andean regions of the South America for 5,000 years, but And this was not known to the rest of the world. They have very high protein, 14 to 16% compared to cereal grains. The best one is the wheat, maybe 13% or 12%, but normal bread wheat is 7 to 9%. Essential amino acids making, complete protein supplement, cholesterol free. And whole grain almost always can be grown in organic way, sources of vitamin B complex A, fatty acids, and it is an excellent source of iron, copper, calcium, and so on. Perfect food for vegetarians and vegans. And currently Peru is the largest exporter, 52,000 tons, Bolivia. And they are now exporting, but they are also consuming. And now with the International Year of the Quinoa declared by United Nations, there's a lot of interest in all over the world. And even it is now started being grown in countries like Australia and so on. The mainstream consumers have started accepting quinoa as an important diet. So this is an example, very much underutilized crop, now becoming a world crop. There's another one called chia, and there are many things like lentils and desi chickpeas. Once upon a time was very much underutilized. Now it's coming globally. Pulses, my own area, this is another good example how they fit in the cropping system and then dietary diversity. This is a poor man's meat at an affordable price. Complementary amino acid compared to the cereals, macronutrients, iron, zinc, and magnesium, and also good quality carbohydrate, high dietary fiber. But more importantly, without going into the details, the amount of nitrogen fixed, the biological nitrogen fixed, and the amount available to the succeeding crop, improved water use efficiency, these are quite important. So anything from 70 to 210 kilograms of nitrogen is fixed, and quite a lot of that is available to the following crop. I will skip these ones. So 2016, Khalid mentioned, I was declared as the ambassador for the United Nations in promoting pulses. We traveled around 16 countries, promoted pulses to researchers and the government, and there has been significant increase in production in many countries of the world, including India. I think Pakistan is now giving a lot of emphasis on pulses. We have captured this some time ago in a paper in Nature Plants. The main point, neglecting legumes has compromised human health and sustainable food production. The other point I want to say is that I mentioned the major crops like rice, wheat, and maize. So much of investment when we looked at 175 million per annum on 13 pulse crops, whereas rice, wheat, and maize will be multi-billion dollars invested, still investing. So there is an imbalance in looking at that. And some of the conclusions, again, this is another paper just came out this year. We looked at how the Asia's forgotten crops to fight chronic and hidden hunger. It really articulates some of the strategies and what are the issues in relation to make them mainstream agriculture. The approach of the transformation of the food and healthy diet, food system need to be looked at holistic, production, processing, including labeling and packaging, distribution and marketing and consumption. The main thing is that we need to promote that so that the main consumers in the cities are aware of that, they start buying, like example, quinoa. Diversified nutrition sensitive agriculture, labeling and regulation, advertising regulation, food-based dietary guidelines, that will help us. So that will lead to a healthy diet, reduction of diet-related non-communicable disease. So if you take a country like US or mine here in Australia, the amount of money spent on public health is huge. So we could argue as an economist, Khalid, you go and put those things and say a fraction of that if you do it much earlier, rather than going and curing and finding out supplements, which is very expensive. One could look at programs. I'll show you some programs, intervention programs, which can lead to substantial health benefits, prosperity to young children, lactating mothers. The whole country, whole nation, whole region can be much more happier, healthier, and prosperous. This is some example. For example, the Future Smart Food Fair we have done in various parts, including Bangkok. The Akshaya Patra, this is the midday meal program in Indian schools, where free meal is given, instead of giving just things made up of corn flour, you have rice, some vegetables, spices, oils, and millets in a healthy way. Or you could think about healthy breakfast program in schools, so the children doesn't hungry, but also it is a much more balanced food. That way, then the whole thing changes, and that's where the government can play. The other one is the governments of various countries buying a lot of food for the soldiers, the Navy, Army, and so on. And in those kind of mess, or whatever you call the canteens, you can have some healthy food. So the farmers, let's say in Pakistan, try to grow, say, for example, let's take one of the millets. And where is the market? So that's where the government can come and purchase those ones and start intervention strategies in the school programs or vulnerable community or to the soldiers. That way there is a ready market. Then advertise in a very massive way. Then the consumers in the city also start buying healthy food. So that way we can diversify the food system. So holistic approach again, from a genetics and breeding point of view, number one is genetic diversity is there, selection and cultivation, harvest, value addition, marketing, and final use and the impact. There are different pathways, outcomes, self-esteem, empowerment, better varieties, practices, novel food, nutritional awareness, rescued diversity, map diversity. This is in relation to genetic resources, efficient value chain, commercialization, branding, conservation of genetic diversity in your genetic resources. So the bigger outcome is self-reliance on value chain actors, competitors, and in the market. So some people say, oh, it's very hard to make a market. But if you look at the holistic approach, you can have economic benefits in addition to all the other benefits I mentioned. Some of these things is captured in a workshop I organized for United Nations sometimes years ago, and that's called Future Smart Food. Quite a good documentation on that. And also similarly, we did some work on mountain agriculture where we could introduce some of these things into the mountain regions, including some organic agriculture production where there could be value added. So Khalid, my last couple of slides, so I can stop on time. The conclusions, the main conclusion is the current food system needs transformation. One of the approaches I'm advocating is diversification by incorporating some of the commonly used fruits, vegetable, traditional underutilized crops, etc. Because this can achieve healthy diet, reduce malnutrition, contribute to food security and nutrition. And these healthy diets will certainly provide more proteins, macro and micronutrients, and vitamins, etc. I think our approach is to eliminate malnutrition or reduce malnutrition, hidden hunger, stunted children, and obesity. Because obesity is also due to just using and certain improper food. Yeah, so I think we also can combat the climate change adaptation, because if you have a monocropping, let's say in Pakistan, certain parts only rice, and all on a sudden something came out, then you could have disaster. Diversity is the way, diversification is the way we can have resilience on the landscape, resilience to the farmers, because we don't have a total wipeout. So what needs to be done? We really need to enhance the awareness of the policymakers. That's the first most. If I was the Minister for Agriculture of, let's say, Asia, one of the first thing I will do is that I'll have an assemble a team of people, experts, and then bring a policy to enhance the food security and income of the small farmers using some of these crops. And this need to be incorporated in the national food system. And ultimately, we need investment, scientific research by public, and also there should be possibility of attracting private sectors, including seed business, the value adding and supermarket chain revolution is happening. These things can be packed, products can be packed and labeled, as now we're seeing quinoa and other crops available. But we as consumers also should be really start promoting. Next time when you go to the supermarket or market, look at a product which you have not eaten, but you know that your parents, grandparents have really used to eat, but that's now taken by the so-called modern processing food. So there is a role for us. There is a role for the major role for the politicians, the leaders, the researchers, and students. We need to really talk about this in classrooms, not just about agronomy of rice, agronomy of wheat and maize. Probably it's time for us to think about the whole holistic approach. And capacity development of the stakeholders, farmers, some of them doesn't know because the new generation farmers doesn't have the knowledge. A lot of the researchers hasn't got the knowledge. So we need to have coordinators on those things. And innovative platforms allow access to information and technology. These days, you can get all the information, what we have produced from the platforms, and share those information on a country basis or as a regional basis. So my last slide is, if you look at the diversification of the food system, let's take its sustainable development goal. No poverty, so it's relevant. Food and nutritional security, zero hunger, clean water, water saving strategies, responsible consumption, life on land when you have beautiful diversity. So improving livelihood, water and land productivity, diversification of the food system, including consumption, conservation of agriculture biodiversity. And I am confident if we have these things in the landscape, the women particularly will have some value in terms of value adding, the women cooperatives and so on. And climate change, I already said that these crops are highly adapted to the local conditions, and national capacity development partnership for the goal 17. So number of nearly 8 SDG goals has got will be satisfied or partially attributed to this diversification of the food system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kadambot Siddique, for a very thought-provoking discussion on national food security policy, as a matter of fact. And I thank you once again for your precious time. Also for your valuable comments about myself as one of the alumni of UWA. That is indeed a player and, very important words for me. Now I open the house for question answer. Before we go to the question answer, I request to Dr. Khalid Mushtaq, in charge Institute of Agricultural and Resource Economics, to please say a few words. Sir, are you there?
Are you listening now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Professor Siddique, for educating us on diversified and food security issues. It was really a very educative session for us. I am being a student of agricultural economics. There's a proverb: you can bring the horse to the well, but you cannot compel him to drink the water. So what I think that we need to develop the taste of the people, consumers. Once the taste being developed, they will automatically move towards the pulses and healthy fruits and vegetable diet. And it was indigenous, or historically it was there in our society. 2 decades before. Yesterday, one of my colleagues, he's working with on pulses project with IARE, Australian Center for International Agriculture. He was telling me that 2 decades before, Pakistan was self-sufficient in pulses production. But then because of the state policies, they were protected. 5 major crops: wheat, cotton, sugarcane, rice, maize. These are the 5 major crops being protected by the state policy, state intervention. And we have not come up with the pulses, and gradually Pakistan has started importing pulses from the other parts of the world. So, we need to have some enabling environment for diversified agriculture, have to move towards, pulses and vegetables. Similarly, there is the issue of, contaminated vegetables. Farmers, growers, they are using too much pesticides, chemicals on the production of the vegetables. That need to be, studied, and that need to be checked, And similarly, recently in 2014 and again 2018, government of Punjab, they have, with the help of the UNICEF, they have carried out a multiple indicator cluster survey. And the reports of that survey, they indicate that, Pakistan, particularly the Punjab province, is facing that child stunting growth issue. Is that too much high? Is 30% plus, I think, if I'm not wrong in my memory. So, that is one of the issue we are facing, in child growth. That, you're right that that can be, through the diversified food that can be solved, And then at the, 30 to empirical studies, they estimate that there are farmers they are producing, and then 30 to 40%, fruits and vegetables, they are being lost at the post-harvest level. So there needs to bring technologies and to help the farmers farm level losses, and at the transportation or at the consumer level or at the market level, how we can reduce these losses, to be saved from when. So these were the and ultimately these are the markets basically that reshape the consumer behavior. So we need to have, these, market campaigns for healthy diets. We need to focus on that. So these are the few points that I have learned from your, Professor Siddique's, presentation, and that has given us some new ideas for future research. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Mushtaq, sir. If I can talk to Professor Dr. Iqrar Ahmed Khan, if you are there, sir. I know that he is traveling, he had to travel. If you are there, sir, you can contribute a few words. I think he is still traveling and there is some issue. Let me add that I'm one of the part of a very newly launched project, that is Park Korea Nutrition Center for to improve child and community nutrition. I'm part of one of the chairs, which is policy outreach and advocacy. So as an economist, I'm there. So Dr. Khalid Mushtaq has raised a few points which are very much related to economy and the marketing aspects. That is very, very true that we were focusing on only 5 major crops, and we lag behind all other crops, and the local diversity and the local crops, they were all wiped out. So let me open the house for question answer session. If anyone has any question, they can raise your hands and then I'll open your mic. Questions, please.
So while the questions are coming, one point I haven't elaborated or mentioned is when we did the identifying the so-called future smart food or neglected and underutilized crop, we asked, for example, a country, and we had 6 or 7 countries. We came to Thailand, FAO office in Thailand, but before coming, we asked certain people from each country to identify what are the most important neglected and underutilized crops based on their experience. So they came up with a list, and we asked them, why is this underutilized? What is the important trait? For example, some may be waterlogging tolerant, some may be drought tolerant, but also what nutritional benefits, even anecdotal benefit. So they came up with a list of 25 each. From there, we debated and cut down to half a dozen, and that's how we just got the priority. So we can't do work with every crop. One need to prioritize in a region, in a district. One region, there may be certain crops important, but that may not be important another crop. Leafy vegetables, tubers, nuts and fruits and vegetables. I think there is a hand raised and there is a question there now.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Amjad Iqbal and then Dr. Sobia Rose. First, Dr. Amjad, please. Dr. Amjad, you can unmute your mic yourself. Your mic is enabled from here. You can unmute yourself, please. In the meanwhile, Dr. Sobia Rose, if you can. Dr. Amjad?
Hello,
Yes, we can hear you, Dr.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Thank you so much for making me part of this very good discussion. Actually, I was interested in this session because at PERI we are doing a similar kind of work. We have analyzed the cropping pattern of Punjab at district level, and at different point of time we have analyzed that which district is most diversified in the cropping pattern. And I just wanted to share some results that according to some surveys, which districts in Punjab are considered to be food insecure. Quite interestingly, our results also match with those results, and we have found that those districts are also less diversified in the cropping pattern as well. Like we have found in our research that our macroeconomic policy environment only focuses on the major crops, which are quite like also extract nutrients from the land, from the soil, and they are also making the people food insecure, because people also mostly consider eating those foods which are grown in those areas. And secondly, the most interesting thing, we also did one more research at PERI that was about food consumption patterns of the farmers. And our results also match with the discussion Dr. Siddique has done, that when people become rich, even farmers when become rich, it becomes a matter of choice. So the point is, at the moment we have to consider and we have to train people that what they need to eat to become nutritionally secure. And even when we move upward on the income ladder, the people's choice becomes they move toward non-nutritious food choices. And thirdly, one more thing I wanted to add here, that what I have analyzed after reading all the food security policy of Pakistan, and after data analysis, that in Punjab and in Pakistan, availability of food is not a big problem. Actually, the problem lies in lack of accessibility of food, and in the marketing and packaging side, and in the stability of food systems. So I think at the moment we need to consider all these things, and I just wanted a comment from the chair on this issue.
You want me to make any comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all a problem. I think what you said is fine. I think local-based studies, surveys finding out what is the food strata, what is the food consumption on a household level, how that is coming from, where it is coming from, then linking with the health department, people working on health. There will be a good correlation as you expect. Then you can also link with the economics in terms of what are the drivers of these 4 crops or 5 crops you mentioned. Of course, then you can link with the government policy. The question then is that how do we intervene? What are the vehicles or the points of intervention, as I mentioned in my diagrams? So one need to then look at case studies and start looking for changes. And you can't really overnight go and change completely. And certainly, as I mentioned, school kids, everyone is so protective of their children. That's one important entry point. Pregnant and lactating mothers, and that's very important area. And then we look at the supermarket chain, which is revolutionizing the world, including your country, where the consumers are looking for novelty, health conscious. So then we bring the marketing of that product. So you have to work hand in hand about it, because you ask farmers to grow something, they will grow that, and if you don't have a market, that will collapse. And then you prioritize, is that the kind of crop we want? We're not asking to replace the entire rice and wheat and maize. We need to have that. They are important crops, but how do they fit some of these crops? It could be leafy vegetables, grains, fruits, nuts. So we're not talking about one fit for all. So a comprehensive analysis, documentation, then working with the government to change the policy change and 2-3 departments have to work together. Health department, Department of Agriculture, universities. More importantly, what I call self-help groups, particularly bringing women into this, because at the end of the day, each household decided largely influenced by women, and then the men go and make the changes, and a community level approach is required. We need to have a target. We can't simply say that a lot of food production. That's not the target. We also need to have what is the health of that community? How can we enhance the health of the community through better nutrition? So look in that sense. It has been done. For example, there are success stories in Nepal. You go to places like Thailand, if you take a food basket every day when you eat a plate of food, is it diversified or is it just mostly rice or chapati and one thing? So whereas if you go to places like Thailand, there is a diversity of leafy vegetables, fruits, etc. It didn't come accidentally. The late king, realized that and he started promoting a diversification of the food system in Thailand.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Amjad, please.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I am thankful to Professor Siddique for a nice presentation, and also thankful to Dr. Khalid Mushtaq for highlighting my commits. I am the part of Pulses project that is funded by Australian government, and yesterday we were attending a workshop related to pulses, and I came to know that up to 1995 or 2000, Pakistan were exporting pulses, and this is thinkable that now in 2021, up to 50 to 70% we are importing pulses. So your presentation is very informative in the mirror that how we can diversify our food system to make us ourselves food sufficient. And one I have query from you that can you highlight a practical example of diversification of food from our region like Asia or any developed countries like your country, that through diversification we can overcome the problem of food security or malnutrition?
Yeah, so definitely that Pakistan and with the help of ACIAR, Australian Centre for International Agriculture Research, is undertaking some work on pulses. I'm aware of that. For example, you used to have a lot of chickpea, and that chickpea area has declined, and a significant import is happening. You have done reasonably well in mung beans, but then there are other crops that still can be fit in the system. So there's no doubt that in this case pulses, but also other crops in the system is important. So the work done in Nepal, clearly they have identified. In Bhutan, there has been significant diversification. Some parts of India, for example, they have a huge increase in production of chickpea in recent years. That's largely a combination of promotion by the government and providing large quantity of new varieties of seeds. Many times farmers want to grow the crop, but they don't have the seed. So the seed system was not there. And a number of other countries in the region are looking. And for example, Australia, if you look at the data from 2008-2009 period, the amount of crops was largely dominated by wheat, and the total value of that crop was about $2.92 or $3 billion. And 2017-2018, that value has increased to nearly $13 billion. So 3 billion to 13 billion. And the wheat area has reduced. Wheat is still the major crop. It is not the 60%. It's gone below 40%. So crops like canola, barley, and large increase in pulse production, chickpea, lentils, faba beans, field peas, all comes into the picture. Canola is a good example where from nothing, it's now this year probably the prediction is 3 to 4 million tons of canola in Australia. So the diversification has occurred. So there are examples in the world where diversification has occurred. But there are also examples where the diversification has declined. You see wheat after wheat after wheat in many places, huge amount of hybrid corn when you go to some parts of China. So the landscape is more homogeneous than heterogeneous in the past. That's largely driven by government policy and the commercial agriculture, farmers growing crops which give high yield, lot of yield, and then putting a lot of fertilizer and irrigation, especially in your country, and they get 4-ton crop and then take to the market, they get a larger money back. But if some of these crops, maybe the yield may not be high, but the value in terms of demand and their use, then you still can get the return.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Myanmar is another example, which is a rice growing country, but they have been exporting chickpea and pigeon peas from Myanmar to including Pakistan and other parts of the world. So and mung beans. They also grow quite a lot of mung beans in Myanmar. Ethiopia is another example where they have increased the production of chickpeas, both desis, but mostly kabulis, and also faba bean and fasciolas, which is the common bean. A number of African countries, there's a huge diversification. West African countries with cowpea, and also the beans, the fasciolas beans. Even there is a Pan-African Bean Association formed by the farmers, PABRA, P-A-B-R-A, PABRA. If you go and look at the amount of work that association is doing, from production to variety development to marketing, and they can trace how the beans move from one part of Africa to the other part, and variety of classes of beans, white, speckled, black, mottled, depending upon the market, classes of. So I'm working in a project with the 6 African countries to improve the cooking time, faster cooking time, and iron and zinc content in beans through breeding. That's a project funded by ACIR. It's 1 year into the thing. We just published a paper recently on that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for a very comprehensive answer to the query of Dr. Amjad. I think we have already taken a lot of time of Professor Dr. Siddique. Just one last question. If anyone has, please raise your hands. One quick question.
I just, have a question from Professor Siddique. Which part of India, Professor, you belong?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm from southern part of India, Kerala, a state which is on the southern tip of India.
Yeah, you are from Kerala. When I was doing PhD in England, so I have a very close friend, Professor, Dr. Kunju Muhammad. He was from Kerala as well.
Okay.
With a very nice personality.
Okay.
I think Kerala has the highest literacy rate in the India.
Yes, that's true. Yes, it is. It's an interesting place, which is quite different. A lot of influence by Arab, then Portuguese, the Christian missionaries. So it's totally a different. And the first Muslim mosque in India, people think it is up in the north, but the first one was in Kerala. So as the first Christian church, St. Thomas came to Kerala, and thirdly, the first Jewish synagogue that was also established in Kerala because of the sea trade those days, sale of Simbad, Silk Route. For example, Silk Route passed through Kerala and then went to Indonesia and then to China and so on. Silk trade.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. There are 2 more hand raised. Can we take 2 more questions,
yes,
sir?
No problem. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. Next one is only.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. First, Natasha, and then Muhammad Hanif. Natasha, please. Let me allow. Okay, you are allowed now. You can disable. You can unmute your. Yes, Natasha, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Muhammad Hanif, if you can unmute yourself. Yes, Natasha, please. Can you hear me? We are unable to hear you, Natasha.
Otherwise, she can type it and send to you, and then you can read.
Okay, if you can't, you can write it to me.
You can go for the other person.
Yeah, Mohammed. I think he dropped from.
Yes.
He lost connection, I think.
Yes.
Okay, Natasha, your message, please. Okay, basically, I think she has written something
Yes.
about the role of women in maintaining food security as a producer as well as an agricultural entrepreneur. Your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so this is very, very important because we're talking about 80% of the world's food is coming from small producers. So your own country, or take, for example, China or even India, which are bigger producers aggregate. So it's coming from smaller producers. That means the average land holding size is going to be less than 0.10 hectares. But if you look at the trade in the global market, is coming from larger producers, whether it is US, UK, Australia, Argentina, and so on. So let us look at the local based food that is coming from small farmers. And the women play a significant role in that, depending upon the culture and the country each. They may not be there in the field working. For example, if you go to places like Bangladesh, women doesn't work in the field, but they work off the field. Whereas in India, you see women working in the field. Perhaps the same in Punjab, not many women work in the field. But the women empowerment and women's role in the whole community is getting more and more. So they can have value-adding processing facilities or ready-made food making programs and so on. So we really need to bring them out of the house. They have the household duties. Some of them are really educated. And how do we just empower them? And providing microcredits and so on, like in Bangladesh, it has worked very well. And that's something which we have to look. Even in our own country, in Australia, there's a lot of role of women in agriculture. They do support a lot of the background work in terms of finance, in terms of account keeping, such a large country. In smaller countries, we really need to look at how the value adding can be done. Can we have smaller scale of machinery, which can be done? Then the women coming in as a group, self-help groups. There are some good examples we have studied in the Punjab, not your Punjab, Punjab in India. We have looked at a few other places where the women empowerment program and women's participation, not necessarily all physical labor, and small scale mechanization is very important so that even women can handle that. Pickle making or product making, value adding, and then labeling that product, and that product then gets into the supermarkets. That's where I see women's role. Then, of course, educating the children, the role of a healthy diet, and what meal they prepare at home. That makes a big difference because the man is busy with work elsewhere, come back, and what they provided is eating. So, and then health and nutrition, that education has to start at the women's side. So there are some good success stories which has helped to develop locally based products, locally based entrepreneurial skills.
Okay, thank you very much once again for a very comprehensive question. I think there are no more hands raised, so let me conclude it and let me take the pleasure to thank Professor Dr. Kadambot Siddique for sparing his precious time and elaborating on a very important topic, specifically on the need of diversified food intake as well as diversified food production and all production system and its value addition. It was a
Thanks.
wonderful session with you, sir. Once
Thanks.
again, very warm and thankful from myself, and specifically for your kind words for your old alumni. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the best, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.